Good morning, I'm Ron Barton, Assistant County Administrator for Hillsborough County. The start of this meeting will be a little odd. I'm gonna carry the first few items until we get to electing the chair and vice chair, which of course then you take over the rest of the meeting. But if you don't mind, since we're hosting, Kevin and I decided to carry the initial part of the agenda. So call to order and of course, welcome. We'll do some introductions a little bit later because we also have a slide that talks about the working groups, which is most of the people here today that helped you with the interlocal agreement. But at this time, I'd ask Tammy to call the roll for consortium members.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So Commissioner Renee Flowers. Present. Commissioner Chris Labala.
Here.
Commissioner Glenn Myers.
Here.
Commissioner Joshua Wassel.
Here.
We have quorum.
And then I think we'll move to pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments? Anybody online or otherwise?
No, we do not.
Okay. So we're at the regular agenda item and we would like to go ahead and elect chair and a vice chair for the consortium. And we can do this in any form or fashion you want. If you have nominations that you want, you may have seen in the interlocal, we even had a little bit of fun with it. He said if it's awkward for us, we'll just start flipping coins. So anyway, for Hillsborough County, maybe I would ask who wants to represent the chair and vice chair.
I'll nominate Commissioner Myers.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then for Pinellas County,
For Pinellas, I'll nominate Commissioner Flowers.
okay. Very good. We have our candidates. We can do it one of two ways. You can arm wrestle, or we'll just do a coin toss if you want for who's chair. Whichever you'd like, unless one of you's, interested in deferring the chair position. I have a coin. Kevin was like, did you bring a coin?
I did not.
You okay with a coin toss for chair?
I've done two.
All right, well, call one.
Yes.
I love it. Yeah. No,
Why you can't have just two chairs?
somebody give me heads, George Washington. You sticking with heads?
Sticking with it.
Okay. You willing to go with tails?
I guess I have.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, we'll see. It's a heads.
Congratulations.
It is not a all heads coin. I just want to make sure. Okay. Commissioner Myers will serve as the chair, and Commissioner Flowers will serve as the vice chair. And it is your meeting. Already? Yes.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking time to come to this morning's meeting. So we're at our regular agenda information, the consortium consolidation overview and responsibilities. No, let me go back. Approve the calendar for 2023-2024.
So we go to page 5.
Those dates are clear on Pinellas County side.
Yeah, we had looked and it looked like first Tuesdays generally were pretty good with those commissions and so. We always can change these if we need to, but you can see the dates, the locations will alternate between CareerSource here and CareerSource there. And I think that's about, and then hopefully the meeting times are adequate for you all. Okay. We'd ask that you go ahead and just approve it.
Have a motion to approve.
I'll move that we approve the 2023-2024 schedule of consortium meetings as indicated.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, then we're gonna go into the information items. And A1,
Sammy, could you go on to the PowerPoint? So I thought it would be helpful before we move further into the agenda, since it's our first meeting. Sometimes it's helpful just to say, how in the heck did we get here? And so we're gonna do a very short version of an overview. And you go to the next page for me, please. I mentioned the consolidated working group, and you know, there are other folks that have assisted as well, but I wanted to just note that we've had a wonderful working relationship with the Pinellas County team. Kevin, my counterpart, we've just worked hand in hand, legal, our CareerSource CEOs. And it's been a wonderful experience, frankly. And the interlocal was not, you know, wasn't a slam dunk effort. And so I'm just proud of the group in total, both in terms of the positive working relationship. And as you'll see, as we go through the agenda, lots more to do. The interlocal was just box number one for the consolidation. So, but I did want to note that here. If we could, let's go ahead and just have everybody. So I'm gonna go over Kevin Knudsen, you know, but just raise your hand for our folks. Corey McCaster.
I'm virtual.
Okay. Cody Ward, thank you, Cody, and Stephanie Marchman, legal counsel from CareerSource Pinellas. And then on the Hillsborough side, myself, Ken Jones, who's been our liaison to CareerSource, Jonathan Wolf, who's our new liaison to CareerSource, Mary Helen Ferris.
Virtually.
Okay, virtual, and Catherine Benson. Those are our two attorneys for the county. And then, of course, our two CEOs, Steve and John's virtual. We see you up in the box.
Morning, everybody.
And then we invited Michelle and Sheila on that staff as well, these to be here. Some of you may know, but John's leaving us. And he's going to the city of Atlanta to work for the mayor of Atlanta on similar issues of workforce. So John, we appreciate all you've done for us, and technically speaking, he's already left. But he's joining us for this meeting, so we appreciate him being with us.
Thank you, Ron. I'll be watching from the sidelines as it goes on. So, but happy to help in any way going forward as well.
Thank you. Tammy is next. So how did we get here? This is familiar to some, and to others it may be a little bit new. Also, we erred towards this information since it's going to be posted on both counties' websites. And as you well know, we're always speaking to the public at the same time. So in June of 21, the legislature addressed what's called the REACH Act, Reimagining Education and Career Health Act, and that was signed into law. And then subsequent to that, there was a working committee, which I believe Chris was involved with as well. And so I looked at the different, mechanisms, and they came up with a recommendation for three major areas. There's some movements and others, but effectively three of our regions would be consolidated, and Pinellas and CareerSource were designated as one of those. Governor blessed that, next to last bullet, with a deadline of July 1, 24. We have gotten assurances from CareerSource as a representative CareerSource Florida that we need a little bit more time, we will, but I have to say that we are fairly optimistic, even though we have a lot of work to do. And then the consolidation working group I introduced to you, and that's the group that basically drafted the interlocal agreement for both of your commissioners. If you could have the next slide. And the interlocal agreement. So we just approved them. We're getting started really quickly. And The term's gonna run through June of 25, but it also has a built-in 1-year renewals. So basically, unless the members of the consortium want to make any adjustments, it's just gonna be perpetual 1-year renewals. Of course, the outcomes, because you're sitting here. 2 commissioners from Hillsborough County, 2 commissioners from Pinellas. And then we just acted upon nominations and voted for chair and vice chair. If you could. And then the interlocal agreement, the one thing I did want to pull out and talk about was the preservation of funding by county. So those funds are still going to come down through DOL and the state to the counties. You are now the county in effect. You're the consortium that represents both counties. And you function in the duties of what's called the chief local elected official, the CLEO, you'll hear us say. And any of you that served on the board have heard it. And so that's the capacity in which you're acting. But one of the things that we wrote into the interlocal were some things that we wanted to make sure both counties were comfortable with. And one of those is that those funds that are allocated by formula will still come designated to the counties. They'll be coming to the consortium in aggregate, but they'll still be parceled by the 2 counties. And the interlocal language gives you guidance that those dollars will be spent in those counties. And so there won't be any crossover unless there's some compelling reason and there's a unanimous vote of the consortium to do something differently. So I wanted to bring that out. I know that was a conversation in the public realm, and we wanted to give both this board as well as the public some comfort level about how that funding would work. And we'll talk a little bit further. Kevin will talk a little bit further about some of the assumptions that we'll be making in the merger relative to basically no harm. If you could go to the next slide. And so that's a quick overview. Certainly entertain any questions. If you're otherwise, we're pleased to go ahead and move forward with the agenda at your discretion.
Do you have any questions? Hearing none, then we'll move right on to action and discussion items. A, B, and C. We do A first.
Okay, I'm gonna take the first 2 and then Kevin's gonna take it from there. So the first one is, does not live in the interlocal agreement, but it was something that our commissioners suggested would be helpful. And so what we have proposed to you here today is an advisory committee. And that advisory committee consists of both the chair and the treasurer of each of the 2 CareerSource entities. And that's why you see here Sean Butler, Gary Hartfield, Scott Thomas, and Barclay Harless. I don't know if Mr.
Barkley
Harless.
had a scheduled conflict,
Okay,
but he said that he would certainly give us.
very good, very good. We, number one, we would like you to kind of endorse and bless that we would use that advisory committee. And we can get into it a little bit later, but one of the things I wanted to precursor was that we have briefed each of the 4 of them. And one of the primary responsibilities for that advisory committee, and we'll get into that recommendation, is to basically be the recruitment committee for the new CEO or the new entity. That way we have representation from both counties through those boards. They've gone through that drill before, so they're very comfortable with it. And of course, there'll be a process defined, which we don't really have mapped out yet, but basically they'll be bringing recommendations to you. Could be even that you want to do final interviews. All that's to be established. We're kind of like in day 1 of this thing. So, but I want you to know that's one of the primary responsibilities that we would ask the advisory committee to entertain. And you can see, from there. So if there are not any questions, or there are questions, happy to answer them, and would ask for your approval of the advisory committee members, as well as the use of that committee.
We have a motion, please.
Move approval.
We have a second.
Second.
Been properly, motion and moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposes? The motion is carried.
Okay, thank you.
Right to item B.
And this is the last one I'll cover in the agenda. So, kind of hinted at it already, we need to get going on, recruitment of the CEO for the new entity. And, so what we're asking for here, and this is a tentative schedule, it's gonna be refined, I'm sure, as the advisory committee also leans into the effort. And, but you know, I think one of the things that we've talked about is targeting maybe end of March, as hopefully a selection. But that's a, you know, that's an aspiration that we need the advisory committee to refine as they get engaged in the effort. So this would allow CareerSource Tampa Bay to issue the procurement. One or the other has to issue because there's only two legal entities. We've talked with Steve, and Steve has been comfortable that CareerSource Tampa Bay can go ahead and procure that recruiter. So there'll be the issuance of an RFQ, pretty quick timeline, as you can see here, to get them on board and get them started in the new year with the recruitment process. So the action that I'm asking for is just to approve us to move forward with the issuance of an RFQ to work with the advisory committee initially as selection recruiting committee, and then allow us to procure through CareerSource Tampa Bay. No, go ahead.
My question number one is, will we be looking at the job descriptions, both from Pinellas as well as Hillsborough, to kind of merge the two to assure that whatever candidate applies, that those roles are very similar?
Yes,
And the other is, would we give in deference to an internal candidate?
oh, sure. Yeah, and it's wide open to who would, you know, want to put their head in the ring. And I think to your first question, yes, this is a new animal anyway, right? So it's a much larger workforce entity, and we need to describe it. So we use both past efforts that describe that position, but also it's a new animal in and of itself that we need to describe. So yes, we would be doing that. And of course, that's part of the recruiter's job as well, is to take some of that information. And Kevin.
I was gonna say, we have the February meeting, we can come back with a draft of that for you to review.
Yeah.
Well, here's why I'm asking. We are in new territory. So whomever the person is that is selected is someone who needs to be very familiar with workforce Florida, as well as how Hillsborough and Pinellas operates. And so to bring in someone from the outside, I understand search firms, because we went through this when we were trying to select somebody for Pinellas. But when you're going through a flux and transition like this, bringing someone in completely new, they're having to, because they've got to still make sure day-to-day occurs while they're trying to handle the merger with the support of all the staff. And so I would hope that strong consideration would go to Mr. Meyer, because he is very familiar. I think he's planning on retiring in a year and a half, so that would give us time to transition through 2024. But I just wanted to put that out there. Those were my thoughts, because it's kind of difficult, like I said, to bring somebody in completely new. They're trying to see to the day-to-day plus the entire transition, and that can be a lot of work. So I'm just throwing it out there for thought.
Thank you.
And it would save us a couple $100,000 on search fund initially. So, but anyway, those are just my thoughts. Thank you for allowing me to ask questions.
Any other comments?
I have a question. Why are we merging?
Well, it's, as you know, there has been a history, in our area, not involving anyone in this room, that has not been a good history. That has resulted in millions of dollars being lost due to malfeasance and other activities. And so the legislature, former Speaker Chris Sprowls, who represents Pinellas County, or represented Pinellas County, tasked me as his education and employment chair to look at workforce boards. And traditionally it was just the education committee. Well, because of what happened in the Tampa Bay and Hillsborough and Pinellas County, he added employment to the education committee to oversee workforce boards. And there, at the time, we talked to the lobbyists of the association, and we said, bring in the best executive, best CEO of one of your boards, because we want to talk to them. And I won't mention who that gentleman is, because I think he still may be around, or what county he was from. It wasn't around here, but he came and presented in front of our committee. And the first question I asked him was, how many veterans did you give jobs for this year? He stood there and had no idea. And I said, okay, well, how many women? And he had no idea. I said, okay, well, can you tell me how many African Americans did you help give jobs? And this guy was making like $250,000 a year. And this was the guy, and it wasn't a setup, that we asked them to bring in the best person that they had. And so we quickly realized that the issue was not just a Tampa Bay issue with Ed Peachy, it was around the state. And so there were a lot of boards, workforce boards, that were doing things that had nothing to do with the simple task of helping our residents get jobs and job placement. And so that's what the REACH Act was all about. And there was similar bills that were passed that year, and the subsequent year.
Okay, so are we gonna be doing anything different merged than we're doing right now today? And let's say John Flanagan is doing.
Well, I'm gonna let several people answer that one, but I'll start. The answer is, we certainly expect that the new entity that we put together is going to do best practices in terms of its programs, its implementation, its financial management. No indictment or negative comment as to the existing two entities, because frankly, there was a lot of work by a lot of people to right the ships. After about five years ago or so. And so very proud of both CareerSource entities and CEOs. But yes, that's the chance when we bring this entity together to look at it in its totality. But one of the things that's very important is in that first merger, we not bite off too much. And so Kevin's gonna go into this. The merger needs to be simplified in order to address, the assimilation within one entity of people, programs, of real estate. And so that's not the time to start winging an evolution of the entity. After that, and I think, lastly, I just say this, that's the job of the new CEO, and that's the job of the new workforce board, to look at that entity and evolve it.
And she said you're retiring when?
Probably about 2.5 years.
Oh, okay, I thought you said.
I would, yeah, if I was asked to serve, I would commit to at least 1.5 to 2 years with the new entity.
If I may,
Okay.
All right.
also in response to your question, which is a very good question, there was a charrette, that's what I'm gonna call it, in the other building, where we had an opportunity to come together with the consultant that the state had hired, to go through some exercises and talk about, the things that we do as individual boards and how we would do things, working together in tandem. And then I participated in a individual interview, if you will, asking me, about my thoughts on the merger. And I'm sure whoever else they interviewed, they asked you some of the same questions. I served on the original board when it was first formed years ago. And when it was Workforce Board, before it became CareerSource. And left the board so another council member could serve. But at that time, or shortly after, there were some concerns here in Hillsborough. So that's when Pinellas was asked to kind of absorb Hillsborough. And that did not go well, as Commissioner Lavallo shared. That did not go well at all. Unfortunately, that person took advantage of systems and processes. And so I'm hopeful that in our merger, because Hillsborough and Pinellas have their own personalities, if you will, and their own drivers when it comes to recruitment for corporations and businesses, small mom and pops, small techs that are moving into the community, that we work together, but also kind of keep that same personality, if you will, for our communities, because they're a little different as it relates to how they're trying to attract businesses, how our downtowns look, how our urban cores look. So I'm hopeful that we'll still kind of keep that in the focus so that we can move together as a group. But much like what we're doing with the funding, there's gonna be certain times when there are things that are little niche opportunities for Hillsborough or niche opportunities for Pinellas, that we can support each other in that and still be successful.
I did want to mention one last thing. So the state of Florida is helping us financially with the merger. So recruiter, legal work, any kind of specialty HR work, all those things that, we need some outside expertise to help us execute on the consolidation. So the state has provided funding, and I guess if we need more, when we get into it, we'll ask for more. But they've been gracious, and, so that is a no cost item to either existing CareerSource entity.
Any other questions? Turn it over to Kevin.
Can we have a motion just to accept the moving forward?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. For recording purposes, I'm gonna ask if you would state your name. I didn't do that earlier, and I apologize. When you begin to speak, state your name for minute purpose. Thank you. Okay. So we're gonna go right on to C then.
Good morning, I'm Kevin Knudsen. I'm Assistant County Administrator for Pinellas County. Nice to meet you both. When we got started on this, we were trying to look at the different options we have to kind of put organizations together. And Scott has not introduced himself. Scott Nicole is with Gray Robinson, and he is an attorney who specializes in nonprofits. And he did an analysis of the different options that we have. And basically there's 3 or 4 different ones. The first one was a merger, a legal merger under the state of Florida rules, where one organization becomes part of the other. Another one was looking at an asset transfer, which is a farm fund transaction, which is a little bit different. Consolidation, where we create a brand new agency out of 2 agencies, or there's other things where we could have made one a subsidiary of the other, or something like that. But in looking through all those options, they're very complicated in some cases. It seemed clear that the best option was to select a merger. It would basically take all of the assets and liabilities of one organization and blend them into the other. If you'd move to the next slide, please. In looking at the 2 agencies, CareerSource Tampa Bay is more than twice as large as CareerSource Pinellas. So it's, we think, in our best interest to merge CareerSource Pinellas into CareerSource Hillsborough or Tampa Bay and create a new name and a new agency out of it using the legal entity that already exists. And so part of the process we'll be going through over the next months, as we're doing this paperwork and getting all this fine, is to determine what the name of the new agency will be. We'll come back to you with some recommendations for that and how that will be structured. There are currently working groups between the two CareerSource entities, looking at all the different areas. HR, all the different functional, operational things that have to happen. And they're gonna come to some conclusions about what's the best outcome in the new organization for the employees. And so they'll be looking at all the different options that currently exist today in terms of benefits, or pay structure, or things like that, organizational structure, and making some decisions about what to recommend back to the board or to the local workforce development board. Right? And so that's our recommendation in terms of the best way to approach it. When we're thinking about doing this consolidation, we have a couple of ideas in our mind. The first one is that we want to make sure that at least in the short term that we don't make any decisions that are going to harm the employees of either organization. Want to make sure that we protect what they have today until we get to the point where we can assess the organization and what the future structure is. We want to make sure that the programming stays just like it is. We don't want any hiccups during the transition. We want to make sure that our residents and our businesses are getting the services they expect and desire during that period of time. And then we want to look at where the locations are in the future, but today we're going to keep them exactly where they are. We're going to keep the leases that we have. We're going to keep the staffing out in the field where they're at as well. So that's the recommendation the staff has in terms of consolidating the.
I have a question. And this is for the lawyer.
Can you state your name?
Oh, I apologize. Chris Lobala from Pinellas. I have a question for one of the lawyers. My understanding is that the federal investigation was ongoing as of a year or two ago. I don't know if it still is. And when Pinellas County sold one of the buildings, it was told to put money into escrow in the event that the feds tried to get some of that money back. Because of investigations that happened, of actions that happened years ago, is there any chance that we would still be on the hook for money for events that happened years ago under the old leadership? And would that liability be under the new consortium, under the new consolidation entity, or how would that work?
So the Department of Labor.
Can you state your name, please?
Yes, Stephanie Marchman, General Counsel for CareerSource Pinellas. The Department of Labor issued a final determination related to that federal investigation, letting CareerSource Tampa Bay and CareerSource Pinellas know that there were certain disallowed costs and demanded those funds back from the entities. And CareerSource Pinellas did pay those funds back. I'm not sure what the status of CareerSource Tampa is, but their attorney. Okay, and both entities are now in litigation, federal litigation with their carriers. And we have consulted, at least we've consulted with our coverage counsel for that case. So they're seeking to get insurance coverage for those disallowed costs to get them repaid to the entities. So in speaking with our coverage counsel about doing the merger, they have advised CareerSource Pinellas that they did not see that would affect the standing or their litigation. So I think Scott, my partner, Scott Cole can speak to that as well in terms of how the merger law works in the state. But my understanding is that essentially any benefit that either entity would have as a result of the litigation would be subsumed by this merged entity. So we wouldn't lose that ability to recover from our various carriers. In terms of any other liability related to the malfeasance you referred to earlier, I believe that as far as I know, there may still be an outstanding criminal investigation. But I know at some point, several years ago, the former CEO of CareerSource Pinellas was interviewed by U.S. Attorney's Office. And so I don't know if there's some sort of outstanding, but that would be related to Mr. Peachy himself, as far as I know, not.
But not on the actual.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Joshua Wolfson, Hillsborough County. Mr. Knudsen, you, this slide with the breakout of employees, does this number represent how many board of directors are on each different board?
Yes.
Why are there so many?
They have to represent.
And is that by legal requirement? Or can we make that less?
I can attempt to field it from the legal perspective. Catherine Benson, County Attorney's Office for Hillsborough County. WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, does set forth certain guidelines for required positions, and so it does tend to be a larger board. I believe Mr. Barton has, and possibly Kevin as well, some ideas about how to not just double the size of the board and still comply with the statutory requirements, but there are certain positions that are required pursuant to statute.
How do we get away with 24 for 150 employees, but they have 30 for only 78? I mean, 33% of their total bodies is board of directors. That's a lot of chiefs and the chefs in the kitchen.
Okay, I'm gonna recognize John Flanagan. John, good morning.
Thank you, Commissioner Myers. Commissioner Wassel, I can tell you by federal legislation under WIOA, the minimum amount of board members is 19, because boards have to be business driven, which means more than 50% have to be from the private sector. And then you have mandatory partners like organized labor, community economic development, education under the Carl Perkins Act, and some others. But that number at a minimum is 19. And the issue with 19, while it can be very concise, you have 3 or 4 people that aren't able to make a meeting, or 5 people that aren't able to make a meeting, then you risk quorum being affected and you can't do the business of the board. So typically, at least in Tampa, we would build a little leeway in there. And then plus add to the fact that we tried really hard to get small business representation on that board to have a preponderance. Even more than 51% of our board is considered private enterprise. So there are some guidelines in the legislation that can help this body identify what that board is. And I believe Mr. Knudsen and Mr. Barton have been having some discussions on what might be the best way to seat this initial board. And I'm not sure if that's spelled out in the interlocal agreement. I do not believe it is, but the setting of the initial board may look different than or could look different than what happens when terms expire and things go forward. But long story short, there are some guidelines in the federal legislation that can identify and assist this body in seating a new board, a new board with a minimum number of members.
I want to add one thing, and so there's John Barton, Assistant County Administrator, Hillsborough County. There's some guidance in the interlocal just related to the fact that we wanted to establish a 50-50 relationship in the board structure. So there's some guidance there. And then of course, it's been mentioned, we have guidelines that are required from DOL. And so we have to kind of adhere to some ratios and some things like that. I can assure you, either Kevin and I are interested in giving to you a board recommendation that just merges these two together. So we're looking at that. I mentioned the advisory committee. A second item that we're going to ask them, and this was in the material, we're going to ask them to also sit with us and develop a recommended board structure for the new. So the chair and treasurer for each will also be helping us make a recommendation to you. By the way, those advisory committee meetings are subject to sunshine and have to meet. We'll have to notice them. So for the 4 that volunteered, you're in for a penny, in for a pound. And but I just want you to know that that's how we'll be also using the advisory committee to help us refine that recommendation, and it will be, as manageable as we can get it.
Any other questions? Ready for a motion? Recommendation coming from?
Are we just receiving the report?
This is a recommendation to move forward in the merge recommendation.
Sorry.
Do we have
Chris Lotball will second it. I'm sorry.
And
Yeah, I said.
Mr. Washington. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposers? That motion is carried. And we're at 11:10 a.m. and we have two sets of items to get through 8, 7, and 8. So I'm gonna ask that we, kind of narrow our focus for what we need to talk about so we can stay on schedule for 12 o'clock. Okay? Moving right to our future action and discussion items. Near-term consolidation. Kevin?
Yes, Kevin Knutson, Assistant County Administrator for Pinellas County. We just wanted to go over what the next steps in this process are gonna be for you. And they're broken up into these two segments, section 7 and section 8, by their timing. The items in section 7 are really things that we're gonna bring forward at the February meeting. We're gonna meet next. One of them, which is to approve the bylaws and the new workforce development board, which is exactly hitting the issues you were just talking about, how many people will be on the board, what seats will be represented. And we're even gonna ask our advisory committee members to recommend who from each board should be considered for those roles, so that you can also seat the board at the next meeting as well. The idea here is that we can work out any detailed recommendations or questions that you have about the bylaws and creation of the board, and then appoint them immediately after we have created. The other thing that we'll want to do at that point is identify legal counsel for the organization and get them on board and working for us at that meeting. Then under item number 8, these are things that we're going to come back to in April through June, the 2 meetings that we have after that. These are the housekeeping things. These are the normal requirements of the chief local elected official duties that you will have that aren't related to the consolidation per se, but more are just normal things that you do, like adopting a budget, requesting the designation and certification of the board that you created, appointing an administrative entity and fiscal agent, the board, the regional local workforce development board, one-stop operators, memorandum of understanding with partners who are doing the one-stop, and then vote to act as a local grant recipient for public funds. So those are all things that are normal for this kind of an organization to do, but aren't related to the actual consolidation that will get on in February.
How many questions? Don't be shy.
You met your objective.
For required legal counsel selection, are we asking for I'm sorry, Renee Flowers? See, I thought that's why we had our things turned so she could see. I apologize, Madam Chair. So for the legal counsel, are we requesting an RFP for services from legal for us to make that determination?
Yeah, that will be for the permanent ongoing legal representation for the new local workforce development board. I should point out that during the interim, while we're working towards this, we probably need to hire somebody to work as our legal representatives for the consolidation. We didn't discuss this before.
That's why I'm asking.
Because, you know, that could be April before we make a decision about who the permanent legal counsel is. But we do have money from the state that we can use to hire, and we do have a proposal from Gray Robinson that we're going to talk about to move forward with that. Not sure how we would handle that though, since we haven't got it on the agenda for today.
I would just, to pick it up, our thought was that we would just continue to use Gray Robinson until legal counsel is selected. Because as you said, we're moving, we're gonna go fast. And so that new legal counsel may find their job is operating a new entity that's already been established. And we've done the heavy lift on the merger. And so we're comfortable using CareerSource Pinellas, our legal counsel for assistance.
So having said that, I think that perhaps we should make a motion to effectuate that effective today. And so I will move the Gray Robinson continue as the legal consultant.
Second.
We have a motion and all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Do we have any opposed? Hearing none.
And then my next one is, so for the bylaws, that will essentially be what was laid out by the state legislature for the new enaction of how we operate.
We will Kevin Knudsen, we will take that into account, but we're actually gonna give you a crosswalk of both the different agencies and the current bylaws that we have and show you what we recommend taking from both of those for the new organization. So we'll give you a complete set of bylaws, but instead of making you read through it and understand it, we'll give you a cheat sheet of how we got there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, since we have the Commissioner Meyer, since we have the bylaws, are we going to develop the articles of incorporation for the merger? This is something to think about.
Yeah, I would recommend we look at the article. So, I'm sorry, Scott Cole, great Robert.
Yeah, you'll be in the box with me.
I would recommend, yes, we would be looking at both the articles and the bylaws for the new entity to make sure they're consistent with what the consortium would like to accomplish.
Thank you.
Kevin Knudsen, we'll make sure the agenda does reflect that. Thank you.
Anything else? Devin? Anything else, ma'am? Anything else from anyone else? Warren?
Covered a lot of ground real quick.
Yeah, I don't want to stay adjourned. Do we have anything else we need to bring before the body? Some people, I was just in a meeting, we coming back, so. Rich and dry. Commissioner Wamsley? Sure. 11:16 a.m. and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much.